All right. Hello, everyone. So, my name is Melody. I'm the producer here at Hack Club, and we are super excited to have you joining us for today's AMA with Guillermo Rauch. So, in a few short minutes, we're going to be kicking things off first, but first, I wanted to tell you about Guillermo. So, he is one of the most prolific names in JavaScript today. So, you may not know Guillermo by name, but he has built some of the most popular JavaScript tools and library that you probably use over the past decade. So, here's a quick look. So Guillermo is the person who created Socket.io, which is a JavaScript library that powers, like real-time communication and messaging across the internet. So for example, a lot of chat apps have been built over Socket.io. So here's an example of a chat app I found on the internet. So let's just enter my name, and I'm gonna enter some random name, and let's see here. So hello, hi, it's me, Valerie. Yay. So what Socket.io is basically a JavaScript library that allows for real-time communication, and even if you never built anything with Socket.io, chances are you pretty much probably use something built with Socket.io. So another cool thing that Guillermo has worked on is Mongoose. And we're not talking about the Mongoose bicycle company, although they do make good bicycles. We're talking about of course, a JavaScript, a really popular Node.js library that allows you to connect to MongoDB databases. So that's super cool. He's also the person behind Slackin, which is a tool that allows you to create like public Slack invite links. But what he's working on right now is Vercel, which is which is basically a platform for deploying web applications to the internet, which is pretty cool. And this company is working on some pretty cool stuff. So I do know that he's also working on this company behind this really cool JavaScript framework built on top of React called Next.js. And I personally use Next.js myself, and it makes like using React super easy. So yeah, so that's basically a quick overview of Guillermo and what he's been working on lately. So yeah, that's my super quick overview of the cool stuff Guillermo is working on. So yeah, so let me tell you a little bit of how the stream will work. So in about a few short minutes, we're going to kick off our AMA. Our friend Lachlan will be hosting Guillermo for an Ask Me Anything chat with our Hack Club students. Afterwards, we're going to be announcing a new program for the community, by the community, called Samurai Making. So if you're high school students, feel free to stick around after the stream to check it out. And then afterwards, we're going to be showcasing some of the super cool projects our community has been working on lately. So check out our ship showcase. And all right, so it looks like we're about ready to get started. But first, can we get some couple claps in the chat really quickly? All right, wonderful. So feel free to share this link to your friends, and be sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy the AMA. So
I'm Zach. I'm founder of Hack Club. And
share this link to your friends.
Oh, sorry. Yep. We first started this AMA series about 6 weeks ago because we wanted to create a place in Hack Club where folks who are stuck at home can have interesting conversations with people that they really look up to, like yourself. So we're so grateful to have you join us today. I'm going to keep it for Lachlan, who's going to be running this call. But thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Zach. So yeah, first I just want to thank everybody who's here, who joined, all the Hack Club students who joined, and everybody who's watching the live stream. My name is Lachlan Campbell. I'm at Lachlan JC. I'm 18 and I'm the head of storytelling here at Hack Club. It is honestly such an honor to have Guillermo here today. I have looked up to him for years, and so to be able to host this conversation is just pretty remarkable. So Guillermo, yeah, I guess I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, but we're gonna spend the first like 10 minutes of this just having a conversation, the two of us, and then we'll open it up to questions from everybody. Guillermo?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. It's especially nice to have this opportunity amid the coronavirus crisis and kind of be able to test out this new way of connecting with people online and live streaming. So I'm really excited. Yeah, so my background is in engineering. I've always been a contributor to the open source community. I started way back in the day getting busy with PHP development. I started contributing to open source to some early PHP projects. Um, Before that, kind of my um, door to the software development world was very much open source as well with Linux. I always attribute Linux to being one of the things that kind of launched me into this world of open source and contributing to projects and learning how to use computers quite deeply. We had a Windows machine at home, but I would get really busy with try to compile my own Linux kernels and the Linux from scratch project and so on. But one of the things that kind of defined my career early on was I noticed that with all the open source things that I was doing, the web was this fascinating medium for me. And I noticed that the web was becoming more dynamic. I started doing some odd jobs online. I was starting to gravitate very strongly with not so much like PHP as a backend language, what also what PHP could do when you would combine it with JavaScript running on the client side and the web kind of becoming alive and starting to do lots of fascinating things like real-time communication. So I started contributing to a project called MooTools. It was one of the biggest JavaScript libraries at the time, competitor to jQuery, and sometimes MooTools ended up being quite remarkable because it was kind of the framework of choice of a lot of quite influential projects. Notably, it inspired a lot of the early investments into JavaScript at Facebook, but also projects like Joomla and lots of other open source CMSs were starting to take MooTools as a dependency. And what's remarkable about this story, I think, now looking back, is that I think I became an official open source contributor to this project when I was 15 or 16. That was kind of like the opportunity for me to rise to more notoriety online and like say who I am and put my face on about pages of this projects. And then my career kind of started with this deep interest in making things very dynamic, interactive, animated. One of my big early contributions was a thing that went viral all over the internet before Reddit was kind of dominant in the social media file link sharing space. Dig.com was a big thing. And getting to the front page of dig.com was so remarkable at the time that people would call it the dig effect. You would get so much traffic to whatever would make it to dig.com. And they made it to dig.com several times. One important thing that I contributed there was a MooTools plugin for creating animations for menus that looked like Flash. So kind of always working on like this super dynamic JavaScript interactive things. And that led me to then later on focus a lot on real-time communication. A friend of mine credits me with like my obsession with real-time was so big, even when we were working on MooTools, that I created the plugin ecosystem for MooTools, and I created a category called real-time communication. And it had only one entry, I think, or two, but I was obsessed with that nascent category, so much so that I discovered that some people were starting to create this idea that later became WebSocket to add the capability for websites to become real time and enable applications and things like Zoom or Google Docs or anything that today is all about collaborating in real time with your peers or your friends. The web was not capable of doing that at the time. So I created this foundational project called Socket.io that kind of served to give people the ability to do real time before all the infrastructure pieces were even there in web browsers. it's crazy how many hacks you could actually use to do real time back in the day, like everything from hiding an iframe in a page and things like that. And it was always about also observing what other companies were doing. And this is a property of the web that I think we could all appreciate, which is the ability to reverse engineer and very quickly understand how things that other people create work. So I spent a lot of that time as a teenager, but later on in my early career, trying to reverse engineer how everything worked. And I was obsessed with a project at the time called Gmail Chat. So Gmail, when they first launched, was just email, obviously just freaking awesome, but it was very much a pioneer in this category of they were pushing the web browser to the absolute limits of what it could do. It was more real time. It could store things on the client side. It had autocomplete. It had all these awesome features that today we take for granted on websites. But Gmail is a super pioneer. And yeah, I spent a lot of my early days um, putting things in like kind of reverse engineering them and like putting them back in place. In doing so for even third-party websites is kind of a big thing for me in the early days. So Mood Tools, then Socket.io, then I kind of in some ways was like super curious about how far we could take JavaScript, and my early interest in PHP kind of moved into JavaScript like quite decisively, and I became an early contributor to Node.js. And at around the same time, I was also starting my first company, and we became sort of the first production user of Node.js, and we became a very important contributor to that project. So much so that we took Express.js, a very popular project, since it was like 0.1 version, and we, contributed it all the way to like where it could actually be used by lots and lots of people today. And yeah, so this my passion then became creating the best possible developer tools and kind of try to give everybody the gift of being able to express their creativity online. I started a company called Vercel and a new framework called Next.js for making this idea of publishing to the web really, really easy and really simple and really scalable as well. Kind of one of my dreams early on was, and it's starting to become real, is what if we can give so much power to the front end developer, to the engineer, that they can publish a thing that can, take over the entire world. I was watching the AMA with Chris Cox and that with Hack Club, and one of the things that stands out about Facebook is how much power they gave to their engineers, how much power they gave to their contributors, how much power they give to young people. And one of their early mottos was like move fast and break things. And I think they kind of then later transformed that into move fast with stable infra. And I think this idea of moving fast at scale, giving the individual the power to put things online, making those things scale and reach millions of people has sort of become the kind of focus of my career so far. And that's how I met Lacklang, actually. I was presenting about Next.js at ReactConf, and he kind of has this endless curiosity and like reached out to me, and like we've been chatting on and off for a long time. So I think I'm also very grateful to have an interviewer like this.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think, most hack clubbers here are like 14 to 18. And so like you talking about like contributing to Mood Tools at 16 and stuff, like it feels like a lot of people in our community are kind of at that stage right now.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, I think first I want to really kind of dig into your early days, because I think a lot of people here are very familiar with Vercel and your work. And we use Vercel at Hack Club, and Next.js I use every day. And so I guess I want to kind of start just like in your early days. So what was your life like growing up? I know you were in Buenos Aires. Like, do you remember the first time you used a computer?
Yeah. So for context, just because I don't want to assume that everyone knows about Buenos Aires, I grew up in Argentina. I grew up in the outskirts of Buenos Aires. So Buenos Aires is kind of this duality of it's a city, which is pretty famous, but it's actually a massive province as well. It's kind of like New York State and New York City now that I think about it. And we all think about New York City, to the dismay, I'm sure, of everyone in Buffalo or other places. But that's kind of how Buenos Aires is. Everyone thinks of the city, it's tiny, a federal district, kind of like Mexico. But I lived in the outskirts, and obviously in the early days of when the internet was nascent, we didn't have much access, right? We had to go by, some of the early things that would be imported into the country by kind of pioneers of the internet that would typically come to the US or pay attention to US media, read US newspapers. And then once in a while, we would get lucky, and like there would be someone that would, sort of say like, we need this in Argentina, and we'll give people early access. So our first access to computers was, we bought a desktop machine that had, I believe it was Windows 95, probably even earlier. We might have even experimented with earlier versions of Windows. And because everything in Argentina is kind of delayed by a few years, I think it was probably in 1997, and we got, that's the first time we had access to Windows 95 and things like that. But one of the things that caught my attention early on was obviously video games, and the process of what kind of one of the early obsessions that I developed was the process of acquiring them, installing them, and just like sort of like hoarding them, and like that whole process of interacting with the operating system and the video games. Not too unlike what I do these days with Steam, where like I shop for games, I install them, and then I forget to play them. But yeah, that was kind of like the big thing. It was like the computer as a device that was enabling this sort of like endless entertainment, and the ability to just like deploy new software onto it was kind of one of the early things that I got really interested in. And my dad was also, he was by training an industrial engineer, but he was kind of obsessed with like living behind what he was taught at school. Not too unlike what I ended up doing myself, only that I didn't go to college. I didn't finish high school, but his thing was like, I feel like whatever I was taught at college was already outdated. So he was always kind of like looking for the next thing. So always thinking like an engineer, but always kind of on the lookout of like, what's the next thing? And like, this is not advice that I would just give everybody in the world, but I do feel pretty strongly that by the time that something gets institutionalized into a course, it's probably going to be outdated at that point, and like you're not really at the cutting edge. So that's how he felt about like computers, the internet, networks feel like the future, and everything that I've been doing kind of is the past. So that's why we're really lucky that even though we kind of lived in the middle of nowhere, it's hard to explain now, but like one of the images that I always give people is like, it was very frequent that like people would like, we had horses on the road and we had cars on the road, and this is not even that long ago. The people that were on the horses were just like, people that were either begging or collecting cardboard or whatever. Like it was kind of like a weird place to grow up in the sense of like, it was kind of like an emerging city. It was having signs of progress, but at the same time, like lots of poverty, lots of violence and things like that. I don't want to paint the picture that it's like, the slums in City of God. Parts of it were, but it was parts of it were really nasty. Parts of it were like really lovely, like small community, small town, and things like that. But we always had to be really careful with any access that we would have to technology, because if other neighbors would hear, like, you never know if you're gonna get robbed and things like that. And like that part was kind of weird, but like we were lucky that we pushed through all those kind of boundaries of fear or thinking that we couldn't access those things, and we try to get technology into our house early on. And the thing that I always think pretty strongly that kind of defined this early days was that this kind of like constant upgrading of our software and looking for what the next thing was. And and that's why, as I was saying earlier, like us making the transition from Windows to Linux, and just kind of like working so hard to make Linux work, which is an operating system that a lot of people joke today, and I'm sure there's a lot of hack clubbers that are trying to use Linux for the desktop. And I say trying because it is always riddled and fraught with challenge. Yeah, Linux gang. It is challenging. Like the drivers don't work, or like So imagine that we're talking like 98 or 97, and I was trying to install Red Hat. Red Hat was a distribution. Today, like everyone knows about Red Hat because it's big for enterprise and servers. At the time, Red Hat's strategy was go to consumer, which is kind of like you hear a lot about this in startups. Like lots of people try first to sell to consumer, then they realize, actually, this technology is better to sell to companies. That was Red Hat. So we got the big early boxes of Red Hat CDs, and just the process of try to make Linux work at my home. Like we had this running joke at the house that like I broke the computer again at home because I made it boot only to Linux. Sometimes I would negotiate with my mom. No, I promise I'm gonna make it. I discovered this thing called Grub, and I'm gonna make it both. I'm gonna give you the option to make it boot to both, and things like that. So it was a lot of fun just growing up, constantly breaking things. Before the interview, I was thinking like, what is one of those defining moments that I remember fondly at home? It was literally breaking stuff all the time. Like my brother also developed kind of a reputation for breaking the hardware because we would try to like take components out of the computer and then put them back in. And I don't know, we would get the voltage wrong, or we would just forget to plug in a fan or whatever. And like we went through so many computers. So I also like looking back, I'm really grateful that our parents were so kind of understanding of that process of just like trial and error, which frankly in the early days it was probably like 99% error and occasionally some success. But yeah, like, like frankly, like we use computers in a very weird way. Like I think most families would just like embrace Microsoft Word, and I would just spend my time trying to like uninstall it and install OpenOffice and just hack around it and compile it from source.
Yeah.
So those were the early days. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I super relate to that. Like, I feel really privileged to have grown up where I did, but I especially like having access to the internet on my own just like totally transformed like what I feel like I could do with my life. That like I was able to like, now that I have Twitter and everything, and like I could like be someone in the world even if I didn't know anybody else who was coding. And also
that was a big leap for us too, right? Like going from the world of you have to get dumps of software in a CD-ROM and insert it into the computer to go to dial-up 56 kbps connection, and like just it's really slow, but getting information and connecting to the world. And then the next big leap was like us getting DSL, which gave us 256 kbps, and like we're one of the earliest homes in our little neighborhood that even had that technology. But that is the thing that started connecting me to the world, and I started joining these IRC servers where I started getting in touch with people, usually older people, that had the same interests that I did. So one funny story that I have is that I was going through one of my cycles of really trying hard to make Linux work and installing the drivers for making the modem work and making our DSL connection work. And this was kind of like one of the biggest obsessions that I had was I had secured a CD-ROM from a magazine that I very likely found that had this software called RPPPO, and that you had to compile from scratch. The complexity there was you also had to recompile the kernel to get the right kernel module to work so that your network device would work. Insane stuff, really. And just I was starting to hit a wall of like, I cannot do this. And then I joined that IRC channel, and this guy, his name was Diego. He was already working for a company, like I think it was even like an international company. And he took the time, this stranger took the time out of his day to call me, because now at this point, like I had to reboot into Windows.
Yeah, I've had this
Windows had internet, go into Linux. And this random guy offered to call me at my house and help me through the process. So I kind of early on, I took a leap of faith, because obviously like the advice is always don't talk to strangers, your parents or whatever. But I took a leap of faith and was like, this guy actually ended up helping me and gave me lots of amazing information. So for me, community was so important. I became friends with all these weird stranger nicknames online Like one of my friends, his name was Netroot. I'll never know who Netroot was, but that was my friend, and we were like on the Linux channel and like learning together, and it was a really fun time.
Yeah, super connect to that. I like there were so many times when I like screen shared with some developer who I'd never heard of, and they like offered to help me like
That's awesome.
fix my Ruby configuration or something, and I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, here it goes. Cool. So jumping ahead a little bit, you mentioned dropping out of high school, and you know that's a that's a very relevant topic here. And like,
I
I
can
mean,
imagine.
not very many people do, but you know, a lot of our community like thinks about that and then like finds that,
At the very least, you think about it. If you're
yeah,
honest.
finds the education not really like supporting their dreams. So for you, like, do you remember the day that like you decided to drop out and what that was like? Like, what was the
Yeah, for context, I credited my high school with a lot of my success because here's the weird thing. I quit it. It's kind of, I mean, I'm not going to make a comparison here, like dot to dot with Steve Jobs, but he talks a lot about like he dropped out of specific classes and he wanted to learn about typography. It was very similar to me. Like I loved my high school because first of all, I made a gigantic effort to get in. So it was a high school that you had to take an entry exam. And I was kind of obsessed with being in the top position of the entry exam, like getting the most points. And it was 4 subjects: math, um, language, history, geography. And then each exam gives you 50 points. And then this was supplemental to elementary school. So you already had to get started with training for these exams. Later on, I learned that I think there is a similar um, dynamic in the US with regards to the SAT, where like people are thinking way ahead of time and so on. So we knew that we wanted to do that. My parents were like, my dad specifically was like, "Whoa, that sounds awesome! Like people that go to that school like learn lots of things that you're never going to learn at any other school." And this school is actually a public school, which is also really awesome. Like you had to like really work hard to get in, but and it was called an experimental school. So what they would do is they would give high school students access to college level professors and subjects, as well as exams. So that school really opened my mind to lots and lots of things that I still use every day, because they taught us everything from like chemistry, physics, accounting, mathematics, calculus, like early on. And I loved it. In the first year, I loved it. I studied really hard. I got into the school in one of the first positions. But then when I was continuing my MO of I'm gonna try to get every point, right? And that literally lasted 2 quarters or less, because then I discovered a new system of points. Quite clearly, I discovered that I could work online
Mhm.
and make money, and or contribute to open source projects and so on. So like I had this like crazy 2 competing systems. I cannot be the best student that gets the most points, because actually once we got in, it
Yeah.
was also pretty freaking hard. So the entry exam was hard, but like after you get in, there was no like free ride either. So what I started doing was like I was paying attention a lot in class, and I was trying to like get good enough grades in the exams without having to study at home, because all my time at home was for working with my crazy clients in the Netherlands, and all these clients that I started getting for like development and doing freelance work. And also like the economy in Argentina was kind of like collapsing at the same time. So I was starting to make money for my family. So I had all these competing sort of problems. And obviously the story goes like obviously tech and work and open source won, so much so that I didn't even get the degree. But what I want to say too is that sometimes you hear these stories of like, oh, ex high school dropout or college dropout. And I think sometimes like not enough credit is given to like lots of amazing things that you can learn that I don't know that you would necessarily learn on your own. But yeah, like to go more concretely to your question
Mhm.
of like the specific time that I dropped out, Mootools was a defining moment for me. Like this library was starting to get used by lots of important companies, and that hadn't happened a lot with me before. I had written a pretty cool plugin for an ORM in PHP, but I had never had this scenario where like companies are reaching out to me to try to hire me. Facebook tried to hire me when I was 17. But one company that did hire me that kind of took a chance was a company in Switzerland, a startup. And that was kind of where like I kind of like forgot about the rest of the world. It's like, not only because it was kind of my ticket out of Argentina, I didn't think of it that way. I was like, this is my ticket into like a whole set of amazing new experiences. And I was like, see ya, everybody. Like, I literally told my mom one day, Mom, I'm going to Switzerland in 2 weeks. You have to sign here, because I was under 18 at the time. So props to my mom that she's always tuned in with all these crazy ideas, because she was like, all right, I get it. You know, like it's not crazy stuff on its own. It's like, actually you're going there, a company's using your project, they are needing to hire people that are experts in this framework, and you're one of the contributors to the framework, so you're an expert. And that was kind of the moment where it was like, oh, so high school, I'm going to start skipping exams. And yeah, it just, that's probably even, I probably never even looked back from them.
Yeah, yeah. I totally understand that feeling. I remember when I was in 10th grade, I got a scholarship to go to ReactConf in San Francisco, and that's actually where we first interacted. And it was my first time going to the West Coast, and I went to San Francisco with my dad, and like going to a tech conference, and it was just like, it was so kind of validating of like that anybody like cared about anything that I did, and also just like really eye-opening of like seeing what the tech world looked like and everything.
I had a very similar experience like that. Like Richard Stallman, the creator of GNU and the creator of Emacs, which I don't love, I love VI, was speaking in Argentina. And he's a super controversial figure, and he's even become more controversial in recent days. But like when that happened, it was like a big deal for Argentina. Like, oh wow, this guy like is coming to give a talk here. And I had that same experience. I went with my dad to the conference, and I got to meet some of the people that I had already been chatting with. And it was a very, very validating experience. So, you know, that kind of taking it into the real world is very, very important. You know, you have to also take that leap of faith outside of just, you know, being a nickname online. Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm going to start opening it up to other questions. So when we're going to have Rishi up first, but when you just give your name and where your hack club is, and so take it away, Rishi.
Hi there, Guillermo. I'm Rishi, as Lachlan already said. I'm 14 years old, and I run a hack club out of Brampton in Canada. So I have a hypothetical for you. You've had an enormous impact on the open source community throughout the years, pioneering some of the biggest software projects in the world and making them open from the very start. It's no doubt changed the world. However, the education system in America and Canada is incredibly competitive, with people competing for the best marks in exams or the most amount of extracurriculars and putting each other down to gain a small advantage. And if you were shot back into the early 20th century to the beginnings of this education system, and you're given full access and full power, right? What is one thing that you would change to make it a little bit more open for people? And why would you do it? But more importantly, how would you do it? Remember, you're still you, but you don't have any of the tools of the 21st century.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, because as I mentioned earlier, I've always been in between these two worlds, right? Like, as I mentioned, for me, getting into that school, and I had to work so hard to get those grades and learning those skills. And I was so proud of it too, because I remember taking the SAT online just as a comparison point, and I was doing so well with it, even though I was very young. So I've always been conflicted by this two realities of like, well, I also started working online when I was 13 and contributing to like important companies. I had clients that were, you know, early e-commerce, like big e-commerce websites. I was like contributing to their PHP code bases. So one of the things that I would say is that we need a lot more understanding about the individual and what is that, what is the path that is optimal for the individual. Like, if you think about the tools that we use today, which are just like age and location, and a lottery system for what school you go to in the early days, it seems to me that we're not really getting the most out of each person. I very much like one of Naval Ravikant's sayings around, no one is going to be better in the entire world at being you. And there is a specific set of skills and talents that you have that nobody else has. And I'm very, very convinced of that. And when I've hired for my company, I've seen that firsthand. There's so many incredible people that I found online that have all these incredible skill sets and interests that I don't feel close to ever attaining, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So I would find the ways that the education system could recognize and give that freedom to each individual's expression and search, while providing a structure around fundamental things that are shared in all of these endeavors. So an example would be, for me, it was very important to have a competition. This was probably for my personality, right? I was involved in the math Olympiad of my school since I was, maybe like 7 years old. And competition and how I'm doing in comparison to myself and others, that was very important for me. I wrote a blog post recently called An Ode to Code Golf, because I think there's all these really cool little competitions that you can partake in that are fun and get you into that mindset of just doing better than you were doing before. So I did a competition like that early on. So Math Olympiad was one. There was a becoming a hacker competition. This was amazing for me. Like, I discovered this website where you started being the lowest ranked, soldier in this like fake military, and you had to hack your way. Each lesson was a hacking challenge, and I kind of become obsessed with this idea of hacking systems. And you made it up to like general, master, super general, right? And the first step was so simple. It was like view source, and there was an HTML comment that took you to the next step, and you could do it in like 5 seconds. Level 16 was you had to download a binary that would only run in Linux. So if you had Windows, like, good luck. And then you had to disassemble it to find the password to crack if you run the binary, it would ask you for a password, and then you had to like submit the password. This idea of giving people ladders of games and challenges, not unlike, like modern games or like World of Warcraft, you want to be like level 70, whatever. We're lacking enough of those games. In general, I think, even like I'm talking about like even at startups and tech companies, like I'd love to see people get better at their jobs through games. So that's one of the things that I would do, is like try to invigorate that sense of fun combined with competition. And by the way, something that was critical for me growing up is like I spent a lot of time gaming. Like I wrote about this recently too. It's like I would have periods of intense like career progression, followed by intense Counter-Strike progression. And there would be like night and day, like 3 months of like, awesome, I'm becoming the best hacker in the universe, to 3 months of like, all I'm doing is like, loading new maps into Counter-Strike servers, like playing with my friends all day long. So yeah, like I'd love to see how education systems can like adapt to this reality of like, people don't want this boring structure. Give people like the freedom to create and experiment and play.
Yeah. So we only have 25 minutes left. So you could keep the answers a little shorter, then we can get some more questions.
For sure.
Cool. Harrison, do you want to take it away?
Oh, yes. Hi, my name is Harrison, and I lead a hack club in Agora Hills, California. So a lot of us were wondering about the rebrand for Vercel. What encouraged you to rebrand it from ZEIT to Vercel?
So there were some logistic issues that kind of forced us to rename. But I always tell people that there were, we think of our company as kind of this intersection of, to reuse Steve's kind of metaphor, liberal arts and engineering. You've all probably seen how much attention and care we put into the design of our tools. So we also see this intersection, awesome intersection between designers and developers. Vercel simplifies our product lineup quite significantly. So we had ZEIT now, and to me, the fact that now you just have Next.js and Vercel as a platform promotes that simplification that is so important to us. And if you really think about the development of any product, it's all about removing that kind of complexity, and that's what takes a lot of the hard work for us, is finding that simplicity. So the rebrand accomplished that. Another really important value for us, and really building a company is, or building a country, is all about that. It's about a strong set of values. One of the important values for us is reliability, and the name is just more reliable. So that was another extra bonus that we got out of that situation, that really frankly happens once in a lifetime of a company. But the fact that the name, you hear it in any situation and you can write it more easily and you can interpret it more easily, and it works across every language in every country, was a very important value for us, because we want to apply that reliability to everything. So in short, it was an opportunity that came up. We grabbed it, and we're very happy with what it's done for us.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great question, by the way.
Thank you.
JP, do you want to go next?
Awesome. Hi, Guillermo. My name is JP. I'm a 14-year-old. I'm an 8th grader in Colorado. Excuse me. And so I'm running a hack club at my school. I was wondering how you build communities with your projects, because it's so cool seeing open source projects kind of created by a small amount of people, or like one person, and they just grow into thousands of contributors, and just so many people relying on these tools every day. And I was wondering how you manage and support such a large community.
Yeah, going back to values, community is one of our guiding values. It was a foundational value for us. We started the company thinking first and foremost about our community. So like everything that we would start, we'd think about that first. How do we get that community engaged? The very first thing we did when we put our website up was, let's get people into our chat room. Let's get people connected to us. Let's start organizing meetups and conferences and ways to get in touch with people. I honestly think that that's the again, like values allow you to values kind of are preserved through iterations of products and technology. We're creating a company that will be around for decades to come, right? So the community being together with us at every step of that iteration is kind of what allows us to retain that that momentum and that evolution throughout time. So more technically speaking, we try to make everything that we can make open source. This is something that Matt Mullenweg, who bought my previous company, would always say: we open source everything except for our passwords. I love that. I think my refinement of that is I open source everything that obviously our passwords we're not open source them, but we open source everything that will allow people to make the product and platform their own. And sometimes we don't open source things that would allow you to run the platform, because we don't think that that's something you would even want to do. So we want to be careful with we have such a big megaphone nowadays that we have the opposite problem of a lot of people that are trying to get a community off the ground. Our community is so large that we have to be mindful of our signal being very clear, right? Even I have to be careful nowadays of every tweet has to be very carefully worded so it is not open to misinterpretation, because someone thinks, oh, I have to change my code to be that or that. So that's the other good point, is being super mindful about your interactions with the community. Everyone is listening and we're all super connected. Make that your value and you'll build a great community.
Awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. Pradyan, next.
Hi, I'm Pradyan. I lead a hack club at Doherty Valley High School, and I direct DB Hacks. So my question for you was, in our society nowadays, we're very much more tech-oriented. You have a lot more kids going to the STEM fields, and we are trying to push kids extracurricularly into STEM more. But do you think that given our societal structure, are we equipping kids to properly pursue these kind of fields, not with knowledge, but with like actual sort of like personality and such?
Yeah, I think the drive towards STEM is a really awesome thing in a sense. I one thing I get a little bit concerned about is one of the things that's made me really successful in particular has been my own obsession and interest in the art of this problem space. I never got into it because of society's pressure, right? I got into it not because of positive economics. In fact, I didn't even understand at the time that like Bill Gates was the richest man in the world because like you can replicate the software so cheaply. You build it once and you reach everybody in the world. So I would say, you know, I I think efforts like Hack Club are absolutely critical to guiding society towards the right place in terms of like making people become legitimately interested in these topics, right? And exposing them to the right people and right role models. So yeah, I think society is probably now overcorrecting a little bit. Like we have too many hacking schools that are promising people that are going to learn everything about computer science and engineering in 30 days and get a job that's high paying. You've probably heard this. So I'm still navigating this myself. I don't know what the best strategy for this is, but I feel like things are still very much in a state of flux.
Also, a couple questions from our chat. So, A, tabs or spaces, and B, Arch versus Debian Linux.
So tabs to space is a great one because the right answer, which is tabs, is not what gets used in practice. And I had a call with Google this morning where they contributed Next.js. And it's so funny that I get this question because like I used that metaphor today to explain to them, well, look, we all know that theoretically the right solution for this problem is this, but I know that that's not what people are going to want or do. So let's find the ways to eventually try to get to that ideal place, but be realistic about what is the momentum. So going back to the previous question of the community, being super in touch with that like momentum of that community is really what enables amazing engineering as well. Because notice that there's this gap between theory and practice. In a lot of cases, you succeed by tuning in to what the, in this case, developer, customer, whatever, actually want to do. So I'm going to say, you know, like I use spaces begrudgingly in a world that, you know, should be using tabs.
Wow, that is like the best answer to that question I've ever heard. I don't think I've ever heard anyone like give a philosophy behind it, but that is fantastic.
Yeah.
And Arch Linux versus Debian Linux.
Say it again.
Arch Linux versus Debian Linux.
Oh, Debian all the way. Like Debian was like the thing that like I was like before Arch was the distribution that all the cool kids were doing. That was more like I'm gonna make everything custom. Debian was there, and for me it was huge. Like Red Hat had a novel installer because they were in this direction of like desktop Linux that was all graphics. They would boot into X11 for their installer, and Debian was like this beautiful, like in curses, just like terminal graphics, and that really made me fall in love with the terminal. So Debian all the way. APT is still like pretty much the most successful package manager that I know of in terms of security, practicality, just pretty all around awesome. But I truly respect the Arch philosophy. Gentoo was big when Debian was also taking off because they had this also system of like compiling from scratch and optimizing for your architecture and so on. So, you know, if I went back in time to when I was a teenager, I would be the Arch Linux teenager today, actually, realistically. But, you know, Debian all the way in my heart.
Amazing. So if you want to ask a question, you can just raise your hand on Zoom. Theo, up next.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I'm Theo. I'm 16. I run a hack club in Boston, and I've worked for Hack Club for the past year and a half. So I have a question about kind of how Next.js came about. So you talk a lot about like PHP and how like PHP was so fundamental because like if you made a file and you put it in a directory and then you went to that
Yeah.
path, like it's there. And
Done.
I agree, like it's so awesome,
Done.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Done.
So like at which point, I assume there was like some time when you got into React. Like after you got into the React, at which point were you like shit, like this needs to exist in the React world?
Yeah, great question. This is a great question because it really is one of the defining moments for our company, and it was one of the defining moments for where we started seeing lots of success in the industry, and where were the signals that we had to double down on that. It was very simple. I had to create the website for Vercel, or ZEIT at the time,
Right.
and I had to create 3 pages. One, to introduce your email, privacy policy, terms of service. And I knew that React was the programming model of the future. Like I had become convinced myself through lots of research and experimentation. And yet creating 3 pages was the biggest pain in the butt ever. I was like, I couldn't believe this gap. And by the way, this is really like, if you want a tip for like successful invention at scale, it would be this. When you find those gaps of like, oh my God, how come the technology is so great if this basic thing is unattainable, right? It was practically unattainable. Like I had to configure a web, I had to download this, I had to download that just to put 3 pages online. And that was, as I said, it was kind of defining for the entire company, because like, you know, I explain to people our platform today as like, it's pages as a service. It's just publish pages next to where your customers are at scale. And yeah, like that, you know, and this is why like simplicity is very hard as well. Like retaining that level of simplicity is always a challenge. It sounds so easy to say, oh, like PHP, let's just be like PHP. It was easy at the time. Let's make it that easy. But making it easy and also making it simple and making it work well when it gets, you know, tested with like the largest websites of the world, that was a challenge for us. Like a lot of thinking went into, can it be both easy and simple? And simple is actually the property that you most likely want. I would even argue that a lot of the things that I've created that are great and got a lot of stars on GitHub and whatever were easy, but they weren't simple, robust, scalable systems. So combining the two is like where like the magic happens.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I actually like I got scared away from React until like I discovered how to use like Next.js with functional components, and now like
nice.
I build websites in it, and it's great. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, I had a similar experience. Like I also used React in the early days, and configuring Babel and Webpack and stuff, site after site, and like everything upgrading. It was just like, oh my God. And I've been using Next since the very first version, and like now it's still powering all of HackClub's websites. So amazing. Sam, you're up next.
Hi, my name's Sam. I'm a Hack Club leader in Singapore. I'm 15. My question is, so schools like a balance in STEM education with like humanities and the arts. How do you think we can apply the principles we learn in the humanities and the arts to STEM?
Great question. So it builds very well on top of the earlier question about community. I think scalable, respectful community management is absolutely essential. I'll give you a very practical example of this. As soon as I released Socket.io, I got trolled on Reddit, like pretty hard. And it was the most silly troll in the history of trolls. And I could have reacted in a number of ways to that. I could have engaged the troll. I immediately noticed that like the troll was just trolling for the sake of trolling, not on technical basis. So I kind of ruled that out. I could have given up on humanity, was a very valid option. Like this guy was, or girl, whoever was just wanting to destroy the commons because this was an open source project, right? I could have stopped doing what I'm doing and like not try to build a community or like not try to like push forward with the project and so on. And I think kind of understanding that sociological side of things, psychological side of things, one of the partners that Andreessen Horowitz talks a lot about, like a CEO skill being managing your own psychology. And not because like I think people should strive to do that, but it's one of the challenges that comes up. It's like you have to manage yourself and your psychology. So many of the skills that have gone into making these things successful are not at all technical. They're all about building community, being socially skillful. And what I mean by that practically is, again, like we've learned really well how to engage with critics, for example, how to engage with people and detect that people are just out there to try to like troll or whatever, how to respond to that with positivity. On the art side, how to apply great design to everything we do. On the communication side, how to use fewer words, right? Like a lot of technical blog posts are like gibberish, and like like effective communication is just one of the most powerful tools you could. I see this a lot with like the AWS blog. A lot of the writers there, they're dealing with incredibly complicated technical things, but they make such an effort to bring it down to reality.
Yeah.
So I would say, I would pay, and this is why I can't possibly dismiss traditional schooling and so on, because like it's very hard to pick up a lot of these things on your own. I was very lucky to like take a lot of psychology classes in high school. Again, going also back to that other great question about like changing this education system, and I think a lot of hack clubbers are going to relate, is I love the idea of just exposing younger people to very difficult concepts. So like throw them into the woods, see what happens. Like expose them to like advanced everything. Not advanced in the sense like, oh, overwhelmed in the since day one, but kids are not necessarily how to put it, like children. They're just adults in development that can, given the right tools, learn any skill and understand any hard concept. So to your question, we can apply that to art, sociology, psychology, and so on. It's just be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
We have 6 minutes left, and we have 3 questions to fit into that. So up first, Melody.
Let's fit them all.
Hey everyone, so I'm Melody. I started one of the very first hack clubs in America right here in Philadelphia. Guillermo, I noticed that you have the Sprinter train in your background, and I actually rode the Sprinter train to visit a hack club out in San Marcos a few years ago. So yeah. So I am like looking over Twitch chat, and one of the questions in the chat is, what do you think are some cool new technologies in the near future we should be watching?
Oh, that's a great question. It actually anticipates a blog post that I want to write. I'm going to answer with 2 things. I'm going to answer with what system do I use to identify the best technologies, and then what technologies I've identified so far. So the system that I use goes related to the question that Theo asked about Next.js. I identified React as a great technology, and then I identified the gap. So one thing that I notice a lot about the world, my blog post is going to be kind of like identify useful primitives. So I think the best technologies already exist. They're widely used. They're already there for you to grab. And there's this gap of them being utilized because they're only being presented as recipe form. Another great example is I use Postmates a lot, and I get all my food delivered from this amazing real-time menu to my door. And I'm not a person that cooks a lot, and I love the idea of it. I've always thought, oh, I'm gonna cook a lot. No, in practice, I just get my food delivered. And I think of like great primitives as like the ingredients of a great recipe. And I think maybe it's just me, but I think most people prefer to go to the In-N-Out drive-through and get a great majestic burger. I love In-N-Out, just random tangent. Rather than try to make their own burger at home. So this is how I identify great technology. So find those primitives that have not been turned into this delightful presentation, and you can bridge that gap. In that process of finding the delightful presentation for the technology, you evolve the technology itself. So we've now made amazing contributions to React, even though we're using it as a primitive of our system. But now because we exposed it to this huge world of data, we've now been able to tell the React team, hey, let's improve X, Y, and Z. Here's the patch, here's this, here's that. Let's work together on this. So that's a system. Then practically speaking, technologies that I'm excited about, I'm excited about TypeScript a lot. I'm excited about improving performance of infrastructure systems with Go, Rust, WebAssembly. I'm excited about creating new languages. I'm going to throw this out for hack clubbers. I think developers nowadays are typing a little bit too much, and my spider sense is tingling that I lived through this with Jade way back in the day, or Hamel in the Ruby community. I think there's a lot of room for experimenting with people typing less. Whether that's with cool IDE stuff for auto-completing imports in components, but also just like, I think this is kind of an axiom of our human condition. We're all hominids that get tired by typing a lot, tired by reading a lot, tired by, coordinating a lot with people. I think you're never going to beat making things really brief. And so I'd love to explore things in that direction. Yeah, I'm gonna be sharing more of these ideas on Twitter because I love answering this question. I can't think of more now, but I should. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, we have 2 minutes, 2 questions. So, Kat.
Hi, Guillermo. I'm Kat. I'm a Hack Club alum and currently attending college in Boston. I absolutely love your idea of approaching things and thinking about the primitives. I'm especially excited to see URLs as primitives for collaboration. So my question is, I think you mentioned a few weeks ago on Twitter that tools like Notion and Rome are much closer to accomplishing Google's mission of organizing the world's information than Google ever has been. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate on some of your thoughts on that.
Oh, wow. That is a great question. Thank you.
1 minute.
Oh, wow. Okay, because, that's the nature of Twitter. You like drop these bombs and then you never elaborate. Okay, so here's the thing. The world has infinite amounts of information, some of which can be captured by search engines, some of which will never be captured by search engines, like the contents of your Slack, the contents of your Notion, your personal notes, and so on and so forth. I'm a big fan in reducing latency, not in the individual primitives, but in the combination of primitives. And I think what Rome and Notion are doing is they're reducing the latency to information capture. So capture as opposed to search, right? Like you go to Google they capture your intent for search immediately, but they're not capturing your input of data. So when you think about like going around the world, and I'm very sympathetic to Snapchat's awesome experiment with the glasses and like trying to snap things that happen in reality just super quickly. I love that. I love reducing the information capture latency. And also that's one trend. Like, let's make it so that like, I can input a quick idea, a dream even. Like this happens to me when I dream and I want to capture my dream really quickly. So these tools are now becoming the first stop to that information capture process. I don't go to like, I don't know, Google Notes, Google Keep or whatever, like, and no one is really. So that's one part. And the other part is privacy. And organizing the world's information cannot just have one big like pipe of public search associated with it. It's like you only have a hammer for every type of nail, right? Or however that saying goes. So my point being there, Google has over-optimized on public information. Now the world, is naturally very private, or very small circles of friends and so on, or very small circles of collaborators like at your company. So let's optimize for that too, right? Like let's make searching your past, searching your ideas, capturing your ideas really quick and relating those ideas. So Rome is doing interesting things, right? Because like Sergey and Larry were all about the, information links of public information, but who's building the links of private information? So that's super interesting as well. I mean, there's just so much innovation to do in that space that you mentioned the URL as a primitive for collaboration. I think very much the direction that we need to go and explore this a lot more.
Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, and then we have one last question before the final question, and that is from Adrian. Take it away.
Um, so what is some advice?
Nice Zoom background,
Uh,
by the way. Sorry, I had to drop the
Thank you.
link.
So what is some advice you would give for like someone who like grew up in South America and also moved to the United States and that wants to get into the tech industry?
Ooh, that's a big one. Let me think really quick. I like the idea of, in general, the place that you decide to move has to be based on you having a great overlap of values. I see this a lot also with like the best way to hire for a company or the best way to apply for a company is that like symmetry of values that makes your new home feel like home. And for me in particular, it was very easy because I loved some of the values, not the ones I would perceive, at least from my home in South America, around innovation, competition, striving for doing the best that you can. Some of those things that I really loved about the US resonated with me way more than the values that I had, that I saw were being upheld in Argentina. So that I think it's that will and identification that is really what enables that translation rather than the logistics of it. Like, oh, I need to approach my visa process like this or that. The visa process is super broken. It was really broken for me. It was broken for the founder of Zoom. He had to apply 6 times. But I think that identification with where he wanted to develop himself and what he had to contribute can overcome any gap of that nature. And that goes for any place that you would want to move, right? Like I think I have a friend of mine that is from Brazil, and he really identifies with the culture of Finland.
Yeah, I'm from
And he
Brazil too.
thrives. And I talked to him, and I was like, "How can you possibly like Finland? It's cold, and it's like this, like." And but that's what he identified with. So that's my point, is that you're gonna find that this is also the best way to approach the best place for you to work at. It's you making that demonstration of that compatibility that will compel people to hire you.
Right. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, and so then to close this out, Zach, the founder of Hack Club, has our final question.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of piggybacking off of Adrian. One thing I've been thinking a lot about recently is how do we keep America to be the place where most of the world's smartest people want to do their life's work? And it's notable that you moved across the world from Buenos Aires to San Francisco, and a lot of people try to do the same thing, and they run up against many barriers. So my question to you is, if you ran a major city in America, whether it was San Francisco or New York City or Chicago or something in that class, and you could basically do whatever you wanted with the city, change housing policy, do whatever you want, what would you do to build the best city for people to do their best work?
That's a great question, because I have given this a lot of thought. One of the things that I would do is I would make the process for incorporating new people into the system very, very transparent and clear and efficient. Even if that means that you turn down a lot of people because it's the reality of the numbers of, the asymmetry between number of applicants and so on. But what gives people, I think, a lot of unnecessary anxiety is just like dragging the process, and like it feels like a battle against bureaucracy and so on. As I mentioned, even in Argentina, like I loved competing for a spot. Like I went to that school knowing that I wanted to compete for a spot. I think that's essential in a lot of systems. What's tragic is when there is some frantic competition for some applicants, and then other applicants find loopholes into systems, whether political or just cheating the system in different ways. So I think I look at this very much like technology systems that we build, with the knowledge that we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with people's dreams and with people's livelihoods. So it's definitely always going to be a very, very difficult subject to manage. But I think we can make just very basic improvements with technology to transparency of these systems. I don't want to throw in the blockchain word, but I'm going to throw in the blockchain. Where like the reality is that this is right. Yeah, like this is an open system, and it should be. America should be an open place for everybody. And then that kind of system requires lots of transparency. And I think we need to like eventually gravitate towards that. Like, and yeah, it's an excellent question. I think when it comes down to like where I see San Francisco today as well, I think it's really challenging. It's I think politically had the way that it's being managed and the way like the gaps of disparity in like rich and poor, homeless and not homeless, the taxation system. There's so much that's wrong that needs fixing. But I think to your point, the most important value that it needs to be preserved is that people from all places in the world can identify with the value system, can feel like they can be a part of it, and then giving them the tools to make that possible.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, I first thank you so much, Guillermo, for coming here and spending your time with us. That was amazing and just like such an honor to have you. For our final send off, I think we should do a traditional Hack Club outro. So everybody, put your hands in, and then we're gonna do a 3, 2, 1, and then we're gonna shout hack. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hack!
Amazing. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you again, Guillermo. That was incredible. And
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Wow, that was super cool to like finally talk to him. He's been
God. Yeah, wow.
for a
Yeah.
while. What did you all think?
I think that was my favorite AMA, honestly.
Same.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, I love the questions as usual.
Yeah, I really liked the like the hypothetical question about fixing the school system. That was especially good.
We got this AMA structure down.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome.
I love this format. I loved like not feeling like we have to like just quickly jump between questions because there are 100 people who want to ask questions.
Yeah.
And we could just like listen to him talk, and he had so many great things to say. Like he had by far the best answer to the tabs versus spaces question of any AMA guest.
That's right. The right answer is neither.
Yeah. Cool. It sounds like I'm going to hand things off to Melody.
All right, wonderful. So thank you all for tuning in, coming to this AMA. I believe my outro, instead of like saying it on stream, is actually my outro is gonna play on stream, live on stream instead of the Zoom call. But I just wanted you all. All right, so thank you all so much for tuning into our live stream today. So in a few short moments, we're going to be showcasing some of our really cool projects that our students have built. But first, I wanted to tell you a little more about Hack Club. So Hack Club is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we rely on people like you to bring coding to high schoolers around the world. So by contributing today at hackclub.com/donate, you can help empower the next generation and bring our programs to even more high schoolers. Now, as of right now, we currently do not have any future AMAs scheduled, but we have some more exciting events in the pipeline. So if you're interested in hearing more about our future AMA stream or events, follow us on Twitter at HackClub. Feel free to follow us on Twitch as well. Recordings of this AMA will be up on our YouTube channel at hack.af/YouTube. And if you're a high schooler, we have a community full of other high schoolers interested in coding waiting for you. So just if you're a high schooler, check out hackclub.com and join our community where, you get to hang out with people like you. So, and if you're a high schooler, one of our community members, Sam, is working on a program that you might be interested in called Summer of Code. Sam, take it away.
If you don't already know, my name's Sam, and I'm a Hack Club leader in Singapore. This summer, me, Roshan, and Neil, all Hack Club leaders, are running a summer program called Summer of Making, and I'd like to introduce it to you today. The goal of Summer of Making is to allow you to gain some awesome project experience with the assistance of your very own personal mentor. It's a 6-week program where you go from an idea to a complete project, and we're open to anything, even remotely related to technology and STEM. Every participant will receive their own industry expert mentor to support them every step of the way. You'll be paired with a mentor who shares similar interests to you. So, if you want to make a video game, that's awesome. You'll be paired with someone who's experienced with game design. You'll have weekly digital meetings with your mentor, as well as being able to message your mentor throughout the week. If you don't already have it, you'll be able to redeem the Hack Pack. And whilst we can't make any promises, if you need something else to make your project possible, let us know in your application, and we'll do our best to get it for you. Once your project is complete, we'll promote it to the rest of the world, as well as supporting you with your own marketing efforts to get the word out about the amazing things you built. We'd really love to have you join us, and we're excited to see what you make. So apply now and submit your idea before May 31st. It's completely free, and we're trying to accept as many people as possible. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the stream, and we can't wait to see what you make this summer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. So again, if you're interested in our Summer of Making program, check out summer.hackclub.com. Next up, we're going to be sharing some of the super cool projects our students have built. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a ship showcase.
DB telephone.
Hi Hack Club, my name is Ruth Ogbemudia, and I'll be presenting COVID-19 by the numbers, aka an email updaters to provide people in my area COVID-19 statistics so that they'll be updated. A few facts about me is that I live in Long Island, New York, and I'm from Africa, and I really like machine learning and coding, obviously. I hope you enjoy my video. Bye! So COVID-19 by the numbers starts with my Google form that I created basically to collect data from users who would like to receive email updates. We are currently trying to expand to SMS updates, which is why I have that on the form, but right now we're only doing email updates. So it provides information on cases, recoveries, hospitalizations, and a bunch of other information such as that. And in the form, you basically provide your information, like I said, name, age, just demographic information, just for me to understand. And you obviously provide your email and notifications if you would like. Then, to show you the back end of what I do, it's basically Python code that sends web scrape data from Wikipedia and other COVID-19 tracking websites and puts all that data into an email. And I basically put all that data I scraped into a nice clean HTML file so that when I send it, it looks like a nice table. I also made it pink just because, I just wanted to make it look cute. So as I'm scrolling down, I basically have a bunch of more Python code. And as I said before, it sends the email. So once it sends the email, it should look a bit like this. As I am typing, and I will click, and voila, it looks like that. I wanted to have it in a table form so it looked more concise and show the data in a very fun way. I didn't want it to look depressing.
2 years ago, I was in quarantine for a month due to a rare disease. During that time, receiving cards from friends and family meant the world because it showed that I wasn't alone. Learning that thousands of patients and healthcare workers are experiencing isolation on the front lines inspired me to create Notes for Support. How it works is you first go to notesforsupport.org, and then you can choose to send a message to a patient or a healthcare worker. Next, you send in a note of encouragement, choose a hospital location, and click Send. I then read through every single message and get them categorized by text length and location. The notes are then printed out and sent across 30 hospitals in 12 states. The hospitals then receive the notes and distribute them among patients and staff. So far, we have sent notes to over 2,000 individual patients and healthcare workers. I've gotten several responses from hospitals saying that these notes are invaluable to their patients and staff, and that they are so deeply touching and encourages them to fight on in the midst of this difficult time. After every shipment and response, I post them on the blog for our note writers to see their tangible impact on the lives of thousands. Being a part of Hack Club and learning by creating has been a fundamental stepstone to this project. I can't wait to see the many more lives we will transform. Thank you.
This is Food Bank Support, a web application that connects those in need with food pickup locations. A user begins by entering their location. Let's say I'm in El Paso, Texas. This opens up an interactive map with the nearest food bank locations or food pickup locations. There's information such as the distance from the inputted address, the address of the location itself, and when provided, there's also breakfast times, lunch times, and also contact information. I started making this during the COVID Global Hackathon after learning that many are struggling to get food because of the crisis, especially students who depend on schools for their meals. Normally, food banks publish the data themselves, but due to COVID, timings have changed and syncing all the information is a nightmare. During the hackathon, I also met some talented developers who joined the team and worked on data collection. Up to date, we've collected tens of thousands of records. All the data you see on the website here was collected through web scraping and volunteer input. And we have since partnered with national organizations like No Kid Hungry and Hunger Free America to exchange this data. Going forward, I hope to keep it as up to date as possible. We're working on automating the web scraping so that it can provide real-time updates if any of the information changes. I hope that this tool can help people find the food they need.
All right, so that concludes our live stream today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Twitch, and we'll see you again soon.